One crop made up 60% of a medieval peasant's protein, and barely anyone eats it now. I mentioned that to a food historian in 2025. She didn't even blink. That's not a surprise, she said. But shouldn't it be? These 6 crops never disappeared. We just stopped paying attention. What do they say about what we value now? Let's take a look. Before we go any further, I want to pause for just a second. Most people watch videos like this without subscribing, and that's okay. But everything you're about to see survived because ordinary people protected it when no one else cared. If you believe food that fed families for centuries deserves a place in the future, hit subscribe. One click helps keep this knowledge alive. Lentils. Lentils are often seen as cheap food, but when you look at the numbers, they deserve way more respect. 100 grams of dry lentils give you about 26 grams of protein, right in the same range as beef. Cooked, you get a bit less, about 8.4 grams per cup. But you also get 7.4 grams of fiber, which meat gives you none of. So where do they really shine? In metabolic health, a 12-week randomized trial showed people eating lentils daily had lower blood sugar, cholesterol, and inflammation. That's a big deal if you're trying to avoid type 2 diabetes or heart issues. Lentils also have a low glycemic index, so they don't spike blood sugar the way bread or potatoes might. What about iron? 3.1 milligrams per 100 grams cooked, which is around 17% of your daily value. Compare that to chicken or pork. Most meat doesn't beat that unless it's liver. Plus, you also get magnesium, potassium, and a lot of folate. It's a full package, nutrient-wise. Now let's talk about growing. Lentils are cool season crops that mature in about 80 to 110 days, depending on the variety. They're legumes, so they pull nitrogen from the air and store it in their roots, cutting the need for synthetic fertilizer. That leftover nitrogen can boost whatever you plant next. You plant them about 1 inch deep, 5 centimeters apart, with rows about 30 to 45 centimeters apart. Thin the seedlings to 10 to 12 centimeters once they're up. They're pretty low maintenance. Just keep weeds down early and they'll handle the rest. And they're surprisingly space efficient. Even in a small garden bed, you can get a few kilos of protein-rich seed. They're especially useful in short season areas or places with limited growing time. So yeah, lentils are quiet, but when you stack up nutrition, soil benefit, and ease of growth, they punch way above their weight. Next is a seed that packs more fiber, more appetite control, and thrives even in poor soils. Chickpeas. Chickpeas have been around for thousands of years, and there's a reason they show up in so many traditional diets, from India to the Middle East to North Africa. They're a staple with strong numbers. 100 grams of cooked chickpeas gives you about 15 grams of protein, 8 grams of fiber, and a solid list of minerals. But here's what really matters. Chickpeas have a glycemic index of 28 to 36, which is far lower than bread, potatoes, or rice. That means they don't spike blood sugar, even in large portions. In fact, one clinical study showed that people who added chickpeas to their meals had 30% lower post-meal blood sugar compared to eating white bread alone. They also help with satiety. People who eat chickpeas report feeling full longer and tend to eat fewer calories over the day. For anyone trying to manage weight or insulin sensitivity, that's a useful edge. Nutrient-wise, chickpeas bring iron, magnesium, potassium, and folate, especially important for heart health and red blood cell formation. They're a strong option for plant-based diets or anyone cutting back on red meat. Growing chickpeas? They're a great option for low-input gardens. They don't need much water after they're established, and they handle poor soils better than many beans. You plant them 3 to 4 centimeters deep, space about 7.5 centimeters apart, and thin to about 15 centimeters once they grow. Like other legumes, chickpeas fix nitrogen if inoculated with the right bacteria. That helps your soil stay healthy and cuts fertilizer costs for next season. They grow best in cool to warm weather, and they're pretty pest-resistant if spaced well. They're also one of the few crops that do well in semi-arid zones. That's why they've thrived for centuries in dryland farming regions like parts of Turkey, Iran, and Rajasthan. Chickpeas aren't just for hummus. They're resilient, practical, and packed with benefits. Next up, we're shifting to a less common crop with even more protein than meat, but it comes with a safety warning that most people miss. Lupin beans. Lupin beans might not be in your pantry, but they probably should be, if you can safely eat them. First, the facts. 100 grams of raw lupin beans give you around 36 grams of protein. That's higher than fava beans, chickpeas, or even most cuts of beef. And that protein comes with fiber, potassium, and a big dose of folate, up to 89% of your daily value. So, what's the catch? Lupins are related to peanuts, and cross-reactivity is real. People with peanut allergies may react to lupin too, sometimes severely. It's common in Europe and Australia, where lupin flower is used in snacks, but it's still niche in North America. Check for allergies before going big on this crop. But if you can eat them safely, they're incredibly efficient. They're used in low-carb, high-protein diets, and even some diabetic food plans. They fill you up, support muscle repair, and improve nutrient density in meals, especially in flour form. Now, for the soil benefits. Lupins are nitrogen fixers like other legumes, but they also tolerate acidic, sandy, and even waterlogged soils, which many crops struggle with. That makes them great for rebuilding damaged land or growing on marginal plots. However, if your soil is alkaline, pH above 6.5, the rhizobia bacteria won't survive well, and you'll need to inoculate every time you plant. It's a small extra step, but it makes a huge difference in nitrogen returns. Lupins grow best in temperate to warm climates, and they don't need heavy irrigation. Once established, they're drought tolerant. They also produce deep roots that help with soil aeration and erosion control. For gardeners with space and no peanut allergies, lupins are hard to beat. They produce high-protein seed, improve soil, and tolerate tough conditions, but they require care, especially with inoculation and harvesting at the right stage to avoid bitter alkaloids and wild types. Next, we're leaving beans and moving into high-fat seeds, starting with one that brings protein and omega-3s in the same scoop. Hemp seeds. When people talk about hemp, they often think about the plant, not the food. But hemp seeds, especially hulled ones, are nutritional heavyweights. They pack over 31 grams of protein per 100 grams, and the type of fat they carry sets them apart from every other crop on this list. That's because about 49% of hemp seed weight is fat, but it's mostly unsaturated. In just 30 grams, roughly 3 tablespoons, you get around 2 grams of ALA, a plant-based omega-3 fatty acid. That's especially important for anyone not eating fish. These fats support heart health, lower inflammation, and help regulate blood pressure. The seeds also provide magnesium, iron, and zinc, making them a solid option for energy metabolism, oxygen transport, and immune support. And they're very low in carbohydrates, just about 5 grams net carbs per 100 grams, which makes them easy to fit into low-carb or diabetic diets. Hemp is more than food. In the garden, it's a strong candidate for soil regeneration. Deep roots break up compacted ground, and dense growth helps suppress weeds. That means fewer herbicides and better long-term soil structure. Growing hemp isn't complicated, but it's not legal everywhere. Industrial hemp must contain less than 0.3% THC in most regions, and depending on where you live, growing it may require permits or registration. So check your local laws before planting. For seed production, spacing matters. Give plants about 2.5 by 2 feet, or up to 9,000 plants per acre. If you're growing for fiber, you can space much tighter, around 4 to 6 inches apart, to encourage tall, straight stalks. What hemp doesn't do is fix nitrogen. It's not a legume, but it makes up for that by producing large amounts of biomass, which you can compost or use as mulch to build soil over time. If your goal is to grow a high-protein, nutrient-dense food that also improves soil and doesn't spike blood sugar, hemp makes a strong case. Next, let's talk about a crop that grows vertically, tastes sweet, and quietly adds nitrogen back into your soil. Green peas. Green peas seem simple. You toss them into soups, pastas, or fried rice without thinking much about them. But from a nutrition and soil health perspective, they punch well above their reputation. 1 cup of cooked peas gives you around 5.2 to 5.4 grams of protein, plus about 20% of your daily fiber needs. That's impressive for a vegetable. You also get vitamin C, vitamin A precursors, potassium, and small amounts of iron. These nutrients help support immune function, eye health, and gut balance, especially useful in diets low in fresh greens. But here's where peas really stand out. They fix nitrogen. Like other legumes, peas partner with rhizobium bacteria to take nitrogen from the air and store it in root nodules. A good pea crop can leave tens of kilograms of nitrogen per hectare behind, which helps fertilize the next round of crops. They also grow fast and vertically. This means you can grow a decent amount of protein in a small space if you use a trellis or netting. That's why peas work well for balcony gardens, raised beds, or tight backyard plots. Start planting when the soil hits about 4 degrees Celsius to 5 degrees Celsius, around 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Sow the seeds about 1 inch deep, spacing them 1 to 3 inches apart, with rows about 18 to 24 inches apart. Most varieties like a bit of support as they grow, and they'll repay you with high yields over a few weeks. They also like cooler weather. That makes them a great choice for spring and fall gardens in temperate zones. If you've got warm summers, plant them early before the heat gets intense. They're also easy to harvest. You can eat them fresh, freeze them, or dry them for storage. The dried peas can later be cooked or ground into flour for baking or soups. So don't underestimate peas. They're efficient, nutrient-dense, and great for your soil. And they're flexible enough to grow even in limited space. Coming up next is the most unusual crop on this list. It's not a bean or a seed. It gives you both food and greens, and it thrives where almost everything else fails. Amaranth. Amaranth is different from every other crop we've covered so far. It's not a legume, and it's not a true cereal grain, but it acts like both. The plant gives you two food sources at once: tiny seeds rich in protein and leafy greens packed with micronutrients. Let's look at the grain first. Cooked amaranth gives you about 7 grams of protein per 100 grams, along with fiber and complex carbs. You also get iron, phosphorus, and manganese, nutrients that support blood health, bone structure, and energy production. But the real power is in the leaves. They're edible, and they contain high levels of vitamin C, iron, calcium, and beta-carotene. That makes them more nutritious than many salad greens or even cooked spinach. Boiling the leaves and draining the water reduces oxalates and other compounds that interfere with mineral absorption. Amaranth isn't picky about soil. It tolerates poor, dry, low-nutrient conditions where most vegetables struggle. Once established, it's highly drought-tolerant and thrives in full sun. Plants can grow up to 8 feet tall, producing large biomass and thousands of seeds per plant. You can plant amaranth after your last frost, once the soil is warm. Sow seeds shallowly. Just lightly cover them with soil and keep them moist until they sprout. After that, you can reduce watering and let the deep roots do the work. It also grows fast. In many climates, you can harvest greens within a month and seeds after 90 to 120 days. Because you get both from one plant, amaranth offers a kind of built-in backup plan. If seed production fails, you still get food from the leaves. There's no nitrogen fixation, but amaranth makes up for it with resilience and nutrient output. It's ideal for survival gardens, low water areas, or food security planning. It's been used since Aztec times for exactly those reasons: long shelf life, high output, and adaptability. When other crops fail due to heat, drought, or poor soil, amaranth often keeps going. Now that you've seen what these 6 crops can do, let's zoom out and talk about why growing protein crops matters, not just for your health, but for your soil and long-term resilience. Let me know when you're ready for the final segment, the zoom-out wrap on why growing these crops beats depending on meat, and how they restore soil and independence. These crops didn't vanish, they just fell out of frame. But they still grow, still feed, and still heal the ground. Maybe the story isn't about them, it's about what replaced them.